March 16, 1979. Harold McCoy's fishing rod slipped from his hands and clattered on the rocks. His breath came in short gasps as he stared at what floated in Blackberry Creek. At first, his mind refused to process it. A deer carcass, maybe. Debris from upstream. Anything but what it actually was. But as dawn light spread across the water, there was no denying it. A man, arms behind his back, face down, completely still. Then Harold saw another body, and another. By the time he finished counting, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely key his CB radio. "This is Harold McCoy," he said, voice cracking. "I'm at Blackberry Creek. I got bodies. Multiple bodies. Jesus Christ, I got at least 7. 20 hours earlier, Vernon Dawson had sat at his kitchen table watching steam rise from his coffee in the pre-dawn darkness. He was 47 years old, with hands stained permanent brown from decades of handling copper moonshine stills. A thick scar ran from his left eyebrow to his hairline, souvenir of a bar fight 25 years back. His wife Betty stood at the stove, frying eggs in silence. They'd been married 26 years. She knew her husband's moods, could read the tension in his shoulders, the coldness in his eyes. Something was happening today, something bad. Vernon's eldest son Dale came in through the back door, stamping mud off his boots. "The phone call was made," Dale said quietly. "They'll meet us tonight at the old bridge. All 9 of them." Vernon nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. His voice when he spoke was flat, empty of emotion. "Good. Tonight we settle this. Pike County, Kentucky in 1979 was a place where poverty and pride mixed into something volatile. The coal industry that had sustained these mountains for generations was dying. Unemployment hovered around 23%. Families that had lived here for 200 years were packing up for cities, for anywhere that still had work. For those who stayed, moonshine wasn't just tradition. It was survival. The economics were simple. A farmer could haul more value in whiskey than in corn. And in mountains where government help never reached, you made your own way or you starved. The unwritten rules governing moonshine territory were rigid as stone. Distribution routes were inherited like land deeds. Territories passed from father to son for generations. You didn't encroach on another man's routes without permission. That wasn't business etiquette. That was survival. Because when you took another man's routes, you took his family's ability to eat. By March 1979, those rules were being tested. Travis Hulcom was 32 years old, with a pregnant wife and 3 kids under 8. He'd spent 12 years in the coal mines, breathing dust that turned his lungs black, watching his father die of the same thing at 52. When doctors told Travis his back was heading the same direction as his father's lungs, he made a choice. He'd start making moonshine. His cousin Jimmy knew the basics. What they needed were distribution routes. The route Travis chose ran north through Devil's Fork, crossing Blackberry Creek, then winding through back roads to Virginia coal camps where miners paid premium prices. It was a good route. Direct, profitable, relatively safe from law enforcement. It was also Vernon Dawson's route, had been for 40 years. Travis knew this, but his reasoning made a certain desperate sense. The mountains don't belong to anybody. The roads are public. If Dawson's got customers, fine. We'll find our own. There's enough business to go around. His wife Ruth had worried from the start. "People say Vernon Dawson's not a man to cross," she told him. Travis had dismissed it. "This is 1979, not 1879. I'm not scared of old men protecting territory they don't own." The first confrontation came in December outside Hilton's General Store. Vernon approached Travis with careful deliberation. "Son, those roads been my territory since before you were born. I'm giving you the courtesy of asking once that you find a different route." Travis stood his ground. "With respect, Mr. Dawson, those roads are public property. I got as much right to them as any man." Something changed in Vernon's eyes. Not anger exactly, something colder. "Then we got ourselves a situation," Vernon said quietly. "For your sake, I hope you're smart enough to resolve it the easy way." But Travis didn't back down. He couldn't. The medical bills were piling up. The rent was overdue. His truck transmission was grinding worse every week. He needed this business to work, and Vernon Dawson was the only thing standing in his way. By February, the situation had escalated beyond words. Vernon's primary still was sabotaged. $6,000 in product and equipment destroyed. Someone had smashed the copper coils with a sledgehammer, knowing exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Vernon stood in the cave entrance at dawn, staring at the destruction, and felt something cold settle into his chest. This wasn't random. This was war. 2 weeks later, one of Travis's distribution runs vanished. 200 gallons of moonshine, $7,000 worth of product, just gone. The truck was found abandoned on a logging road, completely empty. Travis knew who was responsible, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. On February 2nd at Buck's Tavern, Travis broke Dale Dawson's nose in a fight. The crack was loud enough to stop all conversation in the bar. Blood had been drawn, pride had been damaged. In the code that governed these mountains, that required response. Vernon heard about it within 2 hours. That night, he sat in his kitchen long after Betty had gone to bed, drinking coffee that had gone cold. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. A man who won't defend his territory ain't worth the name, man. The breaking point came when Vernon's youngest son, Roy, just 17, was cornered in the high school parking lot by Travis's nephew and 2 friends. They shoved him, threatened him, said words that would echo in Vernon's mind. Your daddy's finished. Hulcoms run these mountains now. Y'all just too old and stupid to know you're dead already. When Roy told his father what happened, Vernon sat silent for a long time. Then he made his decision. I'm done with talking, he said quietly. The preparation began the next day. Vernon bought rope from different hardware stores, paying cash, never buying enough at one place to seem suspicious. He tested the water temperature at Blackberry Creek, always at night. He had conversations with his sons about loyalty, about family, about the price of weakness. On March 14th, Vernon made the call that would seal 9 fates. Travis, this is Vernon Dawson. I think it's time we sat down like reasonable men and worked this out. Travis's relief was audible. I've been hoping you'd say that, Mr. Dawson. Meet me tomorrow night, Vernon said. 11 p.m. at the old bridge over Blackberry Creek. Bring whoever you want. I'll bring my people. We'll hash out territories, make it official. No more problems. That sounds good, Travis said. Real good. After hanging up, Vernon sat motionless. Dale stood in the doorway. You really going to do this? Dale asked quietly. Vernon looked at his son. You ready to let some young punk with 6 months in the business run you off your own territory? Dale shook his head. Then yes, Vernon said. We're really going to do it. March 15th dawned cold and clear. Travis spent the day doing ordinary things that would seem unbearably precious in hindsight. He fixed the garden fence with his son Bobby, teaching the 8-year-old how to hammer nails straight. He ate lunch with Ruth, feeling the baby kick against his palm when he rested his hand on her belly. He played with his daughters, making funny voices that had them giggling. At 9:30 p.m. he kissed Ruth goodbye. Should be back by 1 or 2, he said. Going to settle this thing once and for all. It's just talking, he assured her when she held his hand longer than usual. Vernon wants peace, same as me. Vernon and 12 Dawson men arrived at the bridge at 10:45, 15 minutes early. They parked their vehicles back in the trees out of sight. They'd brought rope already cut into 9 lengths. They'd brought flashlights with red lenses. They'd brought no guns. Gunshots carry for miles, Vernon had said. We do this quiet. When Travis's headlights appeared at 10:58, Vernon stood visible on the bridge, hands empty, the picture of a man ready to negotiate in good faith. Travis climbed out of his truck, relief visible on his face. Mr. Dawson, I'm glad we're doing this. Vernon nodded slowly. Me too, son. Me too. Behind Travis, 8 other Hulcom men were exiting their vehicles, relaxed and unprepared. Vernon looked at Dale, standing in the darkness, and gave the signal. Just a small nod. At 11:01 p.m., 12 Dawson men emerged from the shadows simultaneously. The Hulcom men had perhaps 2 seconds of confusion before they understood. Then it was too late. The ambush was brutal and methodical. No guns, just overwhelming numbers and pre-cut rope. Within 3 minutes, 9 Hulcom men lay on the cold ground, bound and breathing hard. Travis, face pressed against gravel, managed to turn his head. Why? We came to negotiate. Vernon crouched down. This is the negotiation, son. You wanted to take what's mine. Now you're going to learn what happens when you do that. Get them to the creek, Vernon ordered. That's when real terror entered the scene. The Hulcom men understood suddenly that this wasn't about intimidation. They began to fight in earnest, but bound and outnumbered, they were dragged down the steep bank toward water that ran 39 degrees, cold enough to kill in 15 to 30 minutes. Put them in the water, Vernon said. There was no return from that choice. One by one, the bound men were forced into Blackberry Creek. Marcus Hulcom went first, screaming as the shocking cold hit. Travis was next, begging. Please, Vernon, I got 3 kids. Ruth's pregnant. Please. Vernon's face remained impassive. Should have thought about that. Within 6 minutes, all 9 were in the water, up to their chests or necks. The gasping reflex made breathing nearly impossible. The current pulled at their bound bodies. Some had already stopped struggling, their bodies shutting down from hypothermia. "How long?" Dale asked his father quietly. "As long as it takes," Vernon replied. They waited. 12 men standing on the banks, watching 9 men die slowly in water that would do the killing for them. Travis lasted 11 minutes before losing consciousness. His last words, slurred and barely coherent, were, "Ruth, tell Ruth." Marcus lasted 14 minutes. Billy Sutton, the strongest, lasted 18. The youngest, Casey Mullins and Tommy Ray Atkins, died first. Their smaller bodies couldn't maintain core temperature. By 11:34 p.m., 33 minutes after the ambush began, 8 men were dead or dying. One man, Jimmy Hulcom, remained conscious, positioned in shallower water. He kept absolutely still, letting the Dawsons think he'd died like the others. At 11:36, Vernon spoke. "It's done. Let's go." They climbed back to their vehicles. Some were silent, some talked nervously. Wayne Dawson vomited behind a tree. Dale stood for a moment longer, looking down at the creek where 9 men floated in water that reflected starlight. "Dale," Vernon called, "time to go." Vernon sat in his truck, hands on the steering wheel. His hands weren't shaking, his breathing was steady. He felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not remorse, just cold emptiness. "What happened here tonight doesn't get talked about," he said to Dale. "Not to wives, not to anyone. It stays with us. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Dale whispered. They drove through dark mountains while behind them, Jimmy Hulcom clung to consciousness by a thread, the sole survivor of what would become known as the Pike County Creek Massacre. At 6:18 the next morning, Harold McCoy discovered the bodies. Within hours, Sheriff Martin Cole had arrest warrants. They found Vernon sitting on his front porch, drinking coffee, waiting. "We're not running," Vernon said calmly. "We did what needed doing. Now we'll face what comes next." The trial came in September. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was inevitable, guilty on all counts. 9 consecutive life sentences for Vernon. When asked if it was worth, Vernon looked out at the mountains he'd never see again as a free man. "Yes," he said. "Yes, it was." Vernon Dawson died in prison in 2002 at 70 years old. His last words were, "Tell Betty I kept my word." He was buried under a simple headstone, Mountain Man. But the question that haunts Pike County 45 years later isn't about Vernon's guilt. It's about the line between protection and murder, between justice and vengeance. It's about how desperate men become monsters, one pressure at a time, one choice at a time, until the line disappears entirely. 9 men died over territory that belonged to everyone and no one, over pride that meant more than life. And every one of us walks closer to that line than we want to admit.